Athwitch community. We are honored today to welcome to the show Chris Mazzaro, who is the owner of Softball Strong, the co-owner of Arm Pro Bands. She has a degree in exercise physiology. She played for University of Minnesota. She has trained thousands and thousands of softball athletes, which is something that we don't necessarily see a lot of. We don't see a lot of specialization in softball athletes. That's why we are so thrilled to have her today, coming all the way from the West Coast. And she has also made, in addition to being a writer for Softball is for Girls, she has made some DVDs on high-intensity interval training. Hell yeah, because that's what we love for softball, with Championship Productions. So there's so much stuff that she is bringing to the program today. We are so honored to have her. And basically, what I want to mention before I even forget is she does something that's completely amazing, which is on Facebook, on Softball Strong, she posts softball workouts, ladies. So, like, if you do not follow her on Facebook right now, like, I do not know what you are doing. Your head is in the clouds. Like, let's get out there and let's follow her straight away. So, welcome, Chris.
Hello, very good to be here.
So, we are so thrilled to have you and so thrilled to have someone with your expertise. So, tell us a little bit about, like, why specifically you developed Softball Strong. I mean, there's so many other people who just be very general with their sports training, and you're like, okay, you're so softball specific, and you work with thousands of athletes. So tell us just a little bit about that.
I basically started working with athletes because I'm a former athlete, and I thought that there was just this missing link between giving each athlete a specific set of skills with strength and conditioning and flexibility and mobility that they were lacking from either just general training or because their coaches were working them out. And it's I understand it's not a coach's job to understand how to train a player as their number one concern. So they were just kind of doing whatever they could do, or following videos or following workouts. So I thought, if that's the case, since I can't train everyone personally, I'd like to reach as many people as possible and allow them to ask me questions, follow my workouts, kind of see that there's a rhyme and a rhythm to why we do things with softball players. And, really things that I wish I had available to me when I was a young softball player, 100,000 years ago. But, now the
It
game
wasn't
has
that long ago.
now the game has evolved so much. I see the same types of things happening with softball players, and over conditioning, overtraining, the same type of injuries, and the same type of issues that we have. So I was hoping that I could somehow, in whatever way, shape, or form, contribute a positive aspect to that.
I love that. See, because I think you brought up a really important point, which I think is from an instructional standpoint, from the standpoint of like skill development, players are way ahead of where they were 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But from the development of like the understanding of nutrition, or the development of proper cross training, and the development of, I would say, interaction with their teammates, I feel like that's still way behind the actual player skill development. That's my own assessment. That's why I think you have some of these players that are like completely standout-ish, but you tend to see more overuse injuries and things like that. So what I thought was amazing in speaking with Chris last week, and this is just something I totally want her to speak to, she was talking about how certain movements in athletics, athletes will feel like they can't do them. And she's going to speak to us a little bit about why you'll feel like you can't do these motions, especially when it comes to things involving speed. I thought this was great.
Oh, basically the way that I run my workouts is, if I'm doing a general team, we start with a lot of mobility. I'm a big, big advocate of creating mobility and flexibility in players for a number of reasons. I'm going to give you the short version. Basically, a player can't move as they're not as agile if they're tight. Their range of movement and their lateral skills and their ability to accelerate quickly and turn and change direction, even though they don't know it, they're not able to process those movements as quickly if they're not mobile. And secondly, they have a way greater chance of getting injured. So for me, I always start with about 15 minutes of mobility and speed skills, and we slowly just progress. We progress from the ground up. So we start with a hip mobility program. We go into dynamic stretching, active dynamic stretching, and then we progress into a speed drill. So if I see a player who's running and I don't see her taking a long stride, or I can see she's not opening up her hips, or just the way she's moving, I get a pretty good idea if she's tight. And then I can just ask, do your hips feel tight? And if they're like, yes, I'm like, okay, let's go back and do some more stretching for your hips, because it's affecting the way that they move. And these are the things that coaches and players have a hard time translating if they're that tight during a practice or a warm-up, and that translates onto the field in a game, and you can't figure out why your middle infielders are cutting balls off up the middle. That's probably a big reason why. They, besides the lack of their mobility skills, it affects their movement skills. So one thing always ties into another, and we don't really look at that process, but it's a very progressive chain that affects a softball player's movement on the field. So I think it's really important to pay attention to that, and then allow them to give them the tools. That's basically what we need to do, is give tools the players they need to succeed on the field.
Yeah, I think that's like a huge, huge point, because another thing that I think was very common and is still common in some circles is you'll have someone coaching your softball team who was like a football coach and is like, you know what, we're gonna like bulk you guys. I mean, we're both laughing because we have background, in anatomy and exercise physiology and things like that. The people out there are probably like, well, what's wrong with that? Why would you not want to, bench press 200 pounds as a softball player? You know what I mean?
True.
So why don't you speak to why we wouldn't want to bench press 200 pounds and why we wouldn't want to get bulky as a softball player?
I think that, first of all, we're dealing with girls, and even though they're athletes and softball players, but they're still girls and they still want to look like girls. And so when we basically train girls in an aspect that doesn't conform to their sport, we're changing, in a sense, the way that they're going to play that sport. So there's no reason why a girl needs to do 2 or 3 repetitions of a really heavy weight. They need more long repetitions that basically mimic movement skills that they're doing on the field. So a girl doesn't need a bench press because it doesn't help her on the field. It doesn't help her in any way, shape, or form, and it puts a lot more stress on her shoulders, which are already overused as it is. So sometimes I have to kind of give a little to get a little, and if I'm dealing with a team and that coach is like, I want them to bench press, then I'm going to say, okay, let's do this instead. Let's do a single arm dumbbell press. And let's keep the grip inverted, so this way we're not putting as much pressure on their shoulders, and I'm still giving them what the coach wants, but I'm still doing it in a manner that I feel comfortable with, even though I would take away that exercise from softball players anyway. But I can't make up the mind for everyone. I can make suggestions, and then hopefully coaches trust me enough to kind of go along with it.
Yes, and I think, honestly, part of the limitation in terms of cross-training is people feel like they know what they know and aren't willing to further their education like I still see teams out there that will walk out onto the field, not do any kind of warm up and static stretch. And it's like, what are you doing? Especially in New York when there's colder weather, it's like, okay, if you don't like get those muscles warm first, you are actually increasing your risk of getting injured, and people do not follow that progression. Guys, that is why it's so, so important to follow Chris and follow Softball Strong, because, unless you are really we've been talking, we both geek out about this stuff. Me personally, anything with nutrition and information on exercises and I'd be like, yes, give it to me. Let me geek out about it. Let me absorb it. Let me read it. Unless that's you and you're following up on all the most progressive information and you're willing to shadow these really great trainers and you're willing to talk to physical therapists and you're willing to understand different elements that are involved specifically in your sport, man, you've got to be following the best so you can be the best. It's so important. So now I would like you to tell us a little bit about ArmPro bands, and I literally just started watching all the great videos that you guys have on using these different resistance bands. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. My business partner is in Kansas, and we kind of hooked up together because I was writing speed articles for his athletes and his company, and he knew that I worked with a lot of softball players, and I just brought a product to him and said, hey, I think this would be a good product for your company to start carrying. And we ended up creating the business ArmPro bands together. And I'm actually really proud of it because we specialize in softball players. And I don't know too many companies that give as much attention to the softball community that we do. Basically, if you take a look on our website, every single product we have it's in relation to how it can help a softball player achieve strength and power and mobility and acceleration out on the softball field. And I'm really, really glad that we've been able to, again, give back to a community that means a lot to me and that's given me a lot. And it really gives us a really great platform to provide tools for players to be able to succeed. So we are in a generation now where, like you said, when we played, we didn't have all of these outside influences to be able to help us. But as we get to learn more about the body, as we apply it to the sport, we learn how resistance and resistance tools are a measurable increase in helping a player's ability to become flexible, to be able to help them accelerate and work on their speed skills. And we also use those same tools to apply in pitching, to apply in hitting, and it's worked out really well for us. So I'm really excited that we can be this involved in a community that's just amazing and wonderful. And I don't think that it's very often where you have two creators of a company and it's geared towards one sport that are actually highly involved in that sport.
Oh, I don't think that exists in very many places at all. And the website, by the way, ladies, is armprobands.com. But what I would recommend you guys do is, can you just tell us about your Instagram account a little bit? Because if you go to the ArmPro Bands website, you're going to see a lot of really nice products, but you might be like, I don't understand how to use these. So tell us a little bit about what you do on Instagram, because that's phenomenal.
Our Instagram account, I post on our Instagram account every day, and basically we post a video every day using one of our products and using it in the realm of softball. So I think today I used our acceleration speed cords with a girl hitting. Yesterday I used our kinetic bands with a girl hitting. So basically it gives you an idea when you buy our product how you can apply it to whatever you want to use it for, because a lot of our tools are really versatile. So if you use an acceleration speed cord, which really is just a bungee cord, you can use it in your speed work, you can use it with your fielding, you can use it with your hitting, and all of those videos are provided to you on Instagram because we want you to get the most out of your product. We don't want to sell you a product and then have you go, okay, now what do I do with this? In fact, all of our products come with a digital download, and it gives exercises for you to do.
Oh, see that I didn't know. I love that. And Instagram, it's also ArmPro bands on Instagram, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, just making sure everybody's got that out there because I know I think there are certain areas of player development that are really, really underutilized. And I feel like those three areas specifically are, cross training. So I try to get all my girls into some sort of cross training, nutrition, and then of course developing like the mental aspect of the game because nobody's going anywhere without that. So, from my standpoint, I love to see my athletes using I myself use Shakeology. I completely love it. I like to see them drinking lots of water, eating a well-balanced diet, things like that. What are some things that you think we can kind of do to help clean up our nutrition to make it so that we're performing better in games, have better energy in games, things like that?
I think the best thing that a player can do and a parent can do for a player is to be prepared. So
Love
if
it.
you have a tournament for the weekend, know that there's highly likely a chance you're going to be there all day long. And if you can pack a cooler full of things like peanut butter, apples, some type of turkey meat, chicken breast, snacks like any type of fruit, almonds, vegetables, things that way when your player gets hungry between games, you can give them something to basically keep their energy level up. Because if you let's be realistic, the majority of times, especially during the summer, if you're playing in the Midwest, you're playing in temperatures of 90 plus easy with 90% humidity. That's extremely draining. California, it's the same way. You're still playing in 90-degree weather. We just don't have that humidity factor. But either way, if you can prepare and make sure that you give your daughters and your players the tools to be able to have something to eat that's better than what they're offering at the snack bar, then I think you'll see a huge increase in their energy level.
And also, always the planning aspect takes away from bad food choices because, that there's the possibility that you are, going to be like, okay, there's nothing around here. And then you're going to say, okay, well, we'll just stop at McDonald's or we're just going to do pizza. And what people don't realize about that is that it takes so much out of your body to actually eat that sort of food. Like the effort that goes into digesting something like that is so intense. People have no idea that it completely detracts from your ability to perform. That's where I think people are like, oh, well, it's just, fast food. Everybody does it. What does it matter? Well, that's why it matters, because so much of your energy is now being diverted away from what you really want to commit it to, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know what? The more that you do it, the easier it becomes. In the beginning, it feels a little taxing and time-consuming to pack a whole cooler full of food. And I have actually heard some parents say they won't let me bring a cooler into the field. Well, you can keep a cooler in your car because you have ice in there and just go back and forth and get it. The easier it becomes. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. And after a while, it's nothing.
Yes, I agree 100%. I have gotten to the point where at this point, guys, I know I'm you all know me as being vegan and very OCD with what I eat and things like that. But yeah, even if I'm going on a plane trip, I will make plans the day before, go to Whole Foods, get anything that they will allow me to take on a plane, because especially guys, if you're traveling in airports, you think that the things that you eat the day before are not going to affect you. That is not true. You got to make sure, especially if you're traveling by plane, that means, it's very, very dry in there, and you're going to be very dehydrated when you come off. So it's important to make sure that you're drinking plenty, that you're eating well, even the day prior. So we could go on about nutrition, but leave it at that. So I think what I'm going to leave you to talk about for 1 second while I let Kona in, because she is in and out, of course, is what everyone wants to know about, which is speed training. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on speed training. And I am just going to grab my dog for a second.
Okay. um, I, I would hesitate, but speed training is my specialty. I absolutely love to work on speed skills with softball players. I think one of the things that is really lacking that could make a huge difference in a player's speed capabilities is proper mechanics. Unless somebody has worked with a speed coach, they really aren't taught proper mechanics and proper acceleration drills, uh, deceleration drills, lateral movements, and even just the way they run with their body. I see most girls swing their arms outside of their body, their hips move when they run, they want to stand straight up, they don't know how to accelerate properly. And these are some of the things that we go over when I start working with a player or work with a team. We go back to the basics. We go back to an acceleration start. We go back to a sprinter start, to a lateral shuffle, how to properly drop step. Because, we've become kind of a lazy generation. And even girls that are the quickest girls on the team, sometimes they have one of the slowest times to first. And we have to understand the correlation between the two. The girl has no idea how to get out of the box. I've seen girls when they run, they immediately stand straight up. They don't make a straight line to first. And these things are really important. I mean, speed makes or breaks a game. And if you are a fast runner, you have great mechanics on the bases, you're a huge threat to the opposing team. In fact, they will completely change the way they play once you get on base.
I could not agree with that more. My big joke to all my girls is that I would rather throw to a lineup of Crystal Bustoses than I would to a lineup of good slappers. Like, and
Yeah.
I kind of like am half joking, but really I'm not. So I would rather see those power hitters and try to outsmart them, because those really good slappers are really fast. Like, a lot of the time you make the right pitch to them, and they're on base anyway because it's a ground ball. All they need to do is put it on the ground, So yeah, this is why speed is so important, because speed kills the opposition. It really does.
I just wrote 5 reasons why your team is not getting faster, and one of the things that I wrote about is that we just don't pay attention to those little things. So if you have a fast runner on base, it's a good runner is opportunity, and it's opportunity to take an extra base, to run on a pass ball, to do a delay when the team's not paying attention. And how many games are won and lost on one run?
So true. So true. That's awesome. And the other thing that I don't know if this will stand out as much to other people, but what really stood out to me is that Chris also talked about deceleration, because where do most athletes actually get injured?
Slowing down.
That's exactly right.
Their attempt to slow down.
Yes, attempting to slow down is probably a better way of putting it. Yeah. So I think, what a lot of trainers do neglect, or a lot of philosophies in general do neglect, because it's like, okay, yeah, let's develop power, let's develop speed. And that's sort of the sexy part. That's the part that everybody wants to talk about. But what people don't talk about, which is more important, is the fact that if you don't know how to slow down properly after you accelerate, your odds of injury go up dramatically.
Oh, dramatically. I mean, think of the player that slides late into a base. Think of a player who is rounding first, and somebody makes a bad throw, and they try to go back to a base, or they try to go and take an extra base, and they immediately get tagged out. Just that opportunity of learning how to properly slow down and shift your weight and quickly accelerate, it is definitely not taught as much as it should.
So, ladies, if this is not something that your coach is focusing on yet, you have to go out there and do it on your own, because you realize that this has much more of an impact than strictly just whether or not you're going to perform better. This has to do with like your overall health and longevity as a player. And that's really like, I feel as a trainer, something that is probably of utmost important to me. It's probably number one on the priority list, making sure that the girls are set up so that when they throw, they are not going to have those overuse injuries, that they're not going to be taxing joints and muscles that they shouldn't be taxing. Very, very important. So I'd like to know, like, especially because so many coaches and parents are still sort of in the learning stages while they're learning along with their daughters.
Sure.
So what kind of advice do you have for the coaches and parents out there to sort of help them along their path?
I think the best thing to do is to get an incredible team around you. I think that any coach would be smart to, if hitting is not their specialty, to work with a hitting instructor or a hitting specialist. If pitching is not their specialty, to work with a great pitching coach. If they're not a trainer, to get a great trainer on board. Those type of things. And I hate to say it because I don't mean it as a negative thing, but I have dealt with a lot of coaches in my life, and the ones that don't want to do that, I think it's ego based. And but I really hate to see teams suffer, and even a coach suffer, because they're not quite sure of what they're doing. I've been to places before where I watch a coach run a speed drill with his team, and the girls aren't running in a style that I think is going to help them the most in softball, maybe if they ran track. And I won't say anything. I've learned my lesson. I don't say anything unless a coach says something to me, but I think the best thing they can do is find a great team. I think that makes a great coach. I think it makes a great coach to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. Find other people who are good at it. It's like a business.
Oh my God. Okay, first of all, I literally love everything you just said just there. Like every last bit of that. Because I don't know if most of you guys I think know this already, but that I just came from like High Performance Academy a few weeks ago out in California, because all amazing things happen in California, right?
We love California.
Oh my God, California is amazing. If girls, if all of you want to move out to California on a Democratic vote, we will do that. So High Performance Habits which is the book by the person who ran the seminar, and it talks about how so much of being a high performer is not just, everybody's saying, oh, well, it's confidence and it's this and that. Well, confidence, if you haven't put the work into it to be confident, those, I feel like you just hit on this beautifully. Those are the coaches who will have success for a short period of time with their team, and then they will be surpassed and not know why, because they will not take that outside input, or they will for a time and then they won't take it seriously because they want to do everything their way. And the same thing, you and I are both small business owners. We both have more than one business. And what Brendon Burchard was talking about with, people who are high performers, they don't just focus on what they're good at, which is what a lot of people would assume, right? It's like, oh, stick with what you're good at, focus on what you're good at and where your strengths are. And what real high performers do instead, be they coaches or players or the other, right, is that they will take the skill set they need to develop. Like if it's a small business, you don't know how to market, now you're going to learn how to do marketing. If you're, like you said, a coach and you don't really specialize in hitting, or maybe you don't really specialize, you don't know exactly how to do good base coverage and things like that, they'll bring someone in and they will develop that skill. And that's what makes high performers, not the people who are like, well, I know what I'm doing, so,
I agree. And, I really admire those coaches that continue to learn from other people. They continue to learn from coaches that have a tremendous amount of success. I had a coach, I can't even remember where he was going, but he was going to a speech that Mike Andrea was putting on, and he was like, I just want to learn from a guy who's won World Series, who's coached the national team, and see what I can do better. And I don't think there's anything other than growth that could be involved in that. And I think that's great, and I'm glad that he did that for himself and for his team. And I have some coaches that, man, they are organized, on board, and as soon as I walk on the field to do their training, they'll say, this is what's going on, this person got hurt, I'd like to work on this, and, the girls should have won this game, but right around the third or fourth inning, they started going downhill. Can you please talk to them about that? And I like coaches that will involve me as much as they can, because sometimes it's a little different. Coming from a person who played, coming from another woman, and that way we get the idea, because it's those little tiny things that make a really big difference. I have some girls after we run sprints, and they're usually younger girls, and they want to lean against the fence. And I tell them, get off the fence. Stop leaning on the fence. That's lazy. If you go and you're running sprints before a game and that other coach is watching you and you're leaning on a fence, they know that they see that and they take that in. And your team develops this type of reputation without you even knowing it.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's so, we had another coach on a while back who was talking about how a lot of the time your own team defeats itself before they walk on the field with body language. And I just thought,
Absolutely.
what?
Absolutely.
That is brilliant. And I think that's also a great analogy because, the idea of like leaning on the fence, that you're just kind of leaning there, that you're not proactive, that you're not taking responsibility, you're constantly looking for, outside help. Yeah.
It's like, I want a girl that runs a sprint and then turns around and lines up back on the line because she's ready to run another one.
I love that. Oh, yeah. But the way you posture yourself, guys, always think about the animal kingdom. It's a weird thought, but yeah, that's exactly how it is. Think about dogs, think about apes, think about like how they interact with each other by, the dominant of the species almost always puffs up. So if you're walking out there and your shoulders are shrugged and you're like defeatist, like you're defeating yourself before the other team gets to defeat you.
Absolutely. We talk about softball swag quite often, but I don't think that girls understand what it means. They understand the term, they don't understand what it means. And if you explain to them the way that coach put it is perfect. If you defeat yourself before you even walk on the field, to me, it's even the way a team acts when they warm up, the way they behave in between games. It's the way a girl approaches the box, a way a girl approaches her position, the way she behaves in between innings. It's huge. Softball swag is huge, and that's all confidence. That's all confidence, and it's all the way other people will perceive you. And as long ago as it was that I've played, I have friends now that I played against in travel ball in college, and they'll still to this day give me a hard time and go, I remember when your team used to do this. You acted like this when you were there. You this, and I'm like, yep. But they remembered that, and I'm okay with that.
But I will tell you something that this just brings up, because you stay in touch with your teammates, right?
Absolutely.
And do you find, because I was just recently very lucky to spend some time with some of my former teammates that I played with post-collegiately, and I will tell you, they were generally the hardest workers on the field, and they are also now the most successful in their personal lives. Would you say that rings true for you as well?
I do. I think that softball, and I'm going to say any sport for that matter, but because we're on the subject of softball and I can identify with that, I think that being on a team teaches you a lot of really, really important characteristic traits and lessons um, that people who don't play sport may not learn at such an early age. And I actually wrote a blog on Softball Strong that said 10 reasons why softball prepares young girls to become strong, independent women. And there's a lot of them. I mean, I learned at a very young age how to work together as a team, how to communicate, how to sacrifice. I really learned passion for something other than myself at really young age because it was so important for me to win and to succeed and to help out my teammates. And those things are big. And I think something that I find lacking is respect towards a coach.
Yes.
And I think that I was always taught to respect my coach. And, you know, we have a little bit of this this feeling going on with young players that they're very deserving of things they haven't earned. And I don't feel like I'm going out on a ledge on this because I deal with girls every day of the week. And I still see a little bit of that sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's part of the, which is funny, we've talked about this on previous interviews, is the idea of like that everybody gets a trophy culture is kind of a little destructive in some ways, you know, because the idea of, you know, a lot of girls come in and, you know, mom and dad will say, well, she's having confidence issues, but she's also the type of kid who doesn't practice. So like, you know, of course you're going to have confidence issues. You have to deserve to be confident. Like confidence should not just come like, oh my God, choirs of angels are singing and, you know, now you're confident because you sat and binge watched Netflix, you know, for 4 hours. You know, like the confidence should come because you've put the time in and you've put the effort and the work in. So, you know, if you're looking for confidence when you haven't done that, you know, I'm sorry, you're just not deserving of it. That's not something you've earned.
You know, we have that entitled group of people, but what I feel really comfortable saying is I've also, in the same manner, experienced such great girls who have worked really hard. Who, in the beginning, when I start off with them, they not. I mean, they're always a little out of shape compared to what I consider in shape, but also just their mental attitude and the way that they perceive things. I have a team that I've been working with for a couple of years, and when I first started with them, one of their pitchers would start crying, and this is a young team. She would start crying when she would get tired, and once we started applying it to pitching, and she understood that she's setting a tone. She can't mentally check out like that. This is supposed to be hard. She's a completely different player this year.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Completely different. And I think it's affected her pitching on the mound too. I was talking to her dad, and her dad was like, "You have done wonders for her." I'm like, "It's not me. It's her. You know, she's the one who's done it. But if I could somehow help in that, I'm really proud to do that." But now we have a girl who has much more of an opportunity at success at a young age because now she mentally doesn't break down when things get hard, and that's huge.
Oh my God, I love that. That is where the mental component and the daily development of the mental component is so important. Every day, guys, every day. If you don't develop a skill every day, right, you can't expect to get better at it. So if you put all of your eggs into, you know, the physical basket, as it were, you're going to find, and none into the nutrition and none into the mental, you're going to find that you're still not where you want to be, you know?
And you know, this is what I would like, is I would love for girls to get a lot of this development before they go off to college, because
Yes.
once you go to college, it's scary at first. You know, this could be the first time somebody's away from home, and depending upon where you live and where you go, I mean, you could be thousands of miles away from everything you've grown up with. You're at a completely new team, a completely new coaching system, and now you're expected to not only learn all these new things, learn a new environment, excel at school, but now you're also fighting from your position against people who've been playing it at that school for years. So I feel like the more that you can take off your plate, the more you'll succeed.
I love that too. Oh, guys, I hope you're writing a lot of this down. Because I mean, to me, I feel like this is the interview that we really all needed because we really need that cross training. We really need that nutrition. And we really need that perspective of someone who's played the sport at obviously a very, very high level, but who's seeing it from the standpoint of, you know, I'm not just a coach, you're working with all these different players, which is amazing. So guys, what we need to make sure we do, follow Softball Strong, right? Make sure, especially on Facebook, because she's going to be putting up some wonderful exercises for you guys. armprobands.com is the website, and also Instagram, armprobands, I think, right? Because I've seen it a bunch, but yeah, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook.
And is there any other way that you would have people reach out to you, especially if they're not on the West Coast?
Sure. I have online training programs that I provide for players and coaches that don't have the accessibility to me. You can always email me at softballstrong13@gmail.com.
Love it. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Chris. This is awesome. I mean, we could probably make this like a 3-hour interview because there's so much we can talk about. But
this is true.
But this is the important stuff, guys, that you really need to be taking in and you really need to be thinking about. And, you know, Chris has got tremendous resources to really help you get there. So thank you so much, Chris. And
this has been great.
This is a real gift to our community to be able to speak to you. So thank you, guys. And of course, if you like these interviews, we post at least one a month. And peace out, guys. We'll talk soon.